pass it off to you. So
Sorry, say that again, Michelle. Are you going to?
I'll do the introduction and then I'll pass it off to you after just a few minutes.
So you've got are you going to introduce us as well?
That's right. That's
okay,
right.
great. Just wanted to be sure we had it all figured out.
Okay, and you guys are live and recording from this point on.
Thank you. And so now I'm going to put on everything. Michelle, how have you been keeping?
We've been doing great, keeping busy and eagerly anticipating holidays on Friday. So.
Oh, aren't we all? We aren't closing until the next week, but nonetheless, it's still great.
So we have lots of people logging on, and we are just going to.
How many do we have?
We have, we're about 30 so far. So we'll wait for a few minutes and get started on time.
Thank you. They're chatting away. Hi, Peter. Let's just see if we can see people who are coming on. There's Todd. Anybody who's turning on their stuff, I can. This is just a little fun thing while people are in intervention. Here we go. This is called Burt bath. by none other than, of course, Charlie Harper, if you're familiar with his work. Here we go. Just a little smile for everybody. Amuse myself.
I usually did.
Did I do that? I amused myself. Are people logging in just by Zoom call? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Just go for a few more minutes and then I feel like we should have, yes, music in the background. So
happy holidays.
We got lots of people interested in today's webinar. We're up to 40 participants already. So,
hey, fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Keep on coming in. We're happy to have you. Shall we pull it up here too, just so we have it? Is it confusing? Okay. We just have. Oh, should we have another one too? From BCS one, or sorry, OCS one. Those words you're in. Okay.
everybody, we'll just get started in 1 minute. I still see people logging on, so we'll just hang on for a minute and then get started.
I feel like I need some books to sit on or something. No, you know, it's good.
I got one more piece that I can easily do that.
Good. Yeah, it's like a floating head.
Yeah,
You can see my neck.
there we go. We'll move in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's better, ladies.
All right, thank you.
We have over 70 people logged in, and so in the interests of keeping us on schedule, I think we'll get started, if that's all right. I'll kick us off by saying welcome to the CSLA AALA 2020 Congress Webinar Series. Bienvenue à la série de webinaires du Congrès AAPC AALA de 2020. My name is Michelle Legault, and I'm the CSLA's Executive Director, and I'll be moderating today's event. I'd like to begin this webinar with a land acknowledgement. So I'd ask you to please place your feet on the ground, take a breath. We acknowledge that we're gathering today from coast to coast to coast on the lands of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their governments. We acknowledge that the head office of the CSLA is in unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, and the AALA office is situated on Indigenous land in Treaties 6 and 7 territories and Métis regions 3 and 4. These lands have been occupied, traveled, and cared for by Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. Today's webinar features Virginia Burt, who's co-presenting with Emily Thorpe, Time and Reality, a Garden for Adults with Autism. This webinar series is brought to you by the CSLA AALA 2020 Congress Planning Committee. We wanted to recognize the missed educational sessions which were to be featured at our Calgary event in June 2020. We extend our gratitude to the 2020 Congress Planning Committee for all their hard work preparing the Congress. Now, there will be time for questions after the event, so please use the chat box to ask your questions, and I'll relay them to Virginia and Emily after. And now I present to you Virginia and Emily. Ladies, take it away.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and I appreciate all of your organizational abilities to get us here. Everybody, welcome, and thank you so much for coming today. I think what we're going to do, Emily and I we are together, but we're not in the same bubble. I want to be sure if you could, by raising your hand or otherwise, indicate that you can hear me fine with my mask on. If you could, please, just give that to Michelle, if you could just make sure. Otherwise, I will open one side, and then when Emily goes, she'll open hers. So I just want to be sure everybody, all good? Okay, I'm hearing that it's all good, so very good, thank you. First of all, I'll introduce myself. Michelle, you weren't going to do that, right?
Go ahead, Virginia, and give us your biography, your details.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. I'm a landscape architect who specializes in gardens of meaning and healing gardens for people that have special needs. And it is my honor to be working in this particular sector and in particular this one. It's very meaningful to us with respect to, well, I'll just say one has personal connections to these special kinds of folks. So today, I, of course, am, I've been around, have a lot of gray hair. So what I'll say is I'm going to have Emily just speak to her experience, and then we will proceed into the screen sharing while she's talking.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Emily, and I would call myself a professional student. I attend Dalhousie University, firstly in psychology, and then I transitioned to environmental design studies, and now I'm completing my master's at architecture at Dow. And I completed my internship with Virginia because I was just so compelled by her work in therapeutic gardens. And yeah, I was like, there's a lot of deficits in, I find, universal design and in education in general, just which opened my eyes. She helped open my eyes to what we can do to more contribute to healthy and supportive environments. So very happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to do so. Yes.
Thank you, Emily. And so, we're going to tell you about Morgan's Garden. But before we jump into that, and part of the reason why Emily is a part of it, I want to just be sure that I acknowledge carefully and clearly that the LACF had made this research possible. They supported Emily as an intern to do the research for this particular project. We are thrilled to say that that the work that Emily was able to complete with the assistance of LACF was enabled the research to be applied almost immediately to our project called Morgan's Garden. And so I will start by saying thank you there, and here we go. I don't think that it's a surprise really to anyone possibly online, given that you're part of CSLA, but the biophilia hypothesis by Edward O. Wilson really does talk to and speak to nature holds the key to our aesthetic, intellectual, cognitive, and even spiritual satisfaction.
Virginia, I'm so sorry for interrupting, but could we have your video on? We only see your name and we don't see your presentation.
Maybe you forgot to.
Hang on. I'm going backwards, just a moment.
There, you're back.
Here we are.
We now have your
Now
screen.
can you see?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh boy, nothing like a presentation without any images. Okay, here we go. Thank you, LACF. Everybody got that probably by now. Here we go. So Edward O. Wilson is where I was speaking about. And if you haven't read his book, it's a fabulous one. And what I'll say to you is, of course, what I have spoken about on many an occasion at many conferences is just how important our exposure to nature is. And when we design it with intent for a specific population, truly it's heartfelt. And people, you capture some sort of essence that you have the opportunity to move them. You might move them in any way, but you're moving them towards healing in some level. And I'll just say, it has been my experience over and over again. Of course, I do a lot of anthropological and phenomenological research, because it's really all about stories, and it's the stories about people. And so today's story is all about Morgan. The person you see here is Morgan. At age 14, in Ohio, so this project is located in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. At age 17, children are taken out of, and I'm going to call it state-supported programs, and they then have, and I'm going to say they're adult programs. As a result, something called Monarch School, LifeWorks, created a program for adults with autism. Morgan sadly and suddenly passed away at age 21 after having been in the program from age 17. The LifeWorks, it's a not-for-profit, but what they're really looking to do is to create an enriched life for folks who have some severe and various difficulties. And it's certainly a way for them to be able to learn, engage, and participate in our society. Emily, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about this population.
Oh, yeah. Well, our first step is to really understand who is or are the ultimate clients. And my role coming in as an intern was to help further the design team's preliminary understanding of ASD by collecting research, specific considerations that need to be accounted for. Case studies, really anything that could inform this particular project. Yeah, so like I said before, therapeutic gardens and view of holistic health and well-being, which is what drove me to apply for this internship. But it really contributes to, yes, that the deficits in conception I find in considerations of universal design, and can help in the creation of healthy and supportive environments.
And I'll just speak to this for a brief moment. It's Virginia again. And I think, Emily very succinctly put 2 paragraphs, and literally something that we have known intuitively and known throughout history, is how important that connection to nature is. And I'll just say it this way: mental health, mental health has become our second pandemic, is really what's happening out there. So I would just say how important this work has become, even in just the past little while.
So let's get into it and talk about the nature of ASD. And there's a well-known saying or phrase that goes, if you've met one person with autism, then you've really met only one person with autism. And this phrase is really meant to characterize the variability, as it is a spectrum of neurobiological diversity. And as a design team, the more we looked into this growing population of those diagnosed with ASD, the more we started questioning the standards of inclusive environments and of accessibility. And especially as an architecture student, I found that when we think of accessibility, there are generalized one-size-fits-all solutions. And we know that, all living things have preferred ecological niches where they thrive. One size fits all fits nobody right. And the needs of those with ASD require more specificity, yet diversity, as by definition must accommodate a broader range of neurodiverse individuals. And these considerations are being largely excluded from building codes, and it's a serious concern since these individuals are more sensitive, either hyposensitive or hypersensitive, to their physical surroundings than the average neurotypical person per se.
Just go back one.
Okay.
If you could just speak to this slide just for a brief minute, just to talk about that diversity.
Yeah, so this really summarizes the broad range of what's going on. So the social communication deficits, repetitive behaviors, language disability, and it's an intellectual disability, but it also is, it umbrellas so many other things, including, which isn't even listed here, but the visual acuity. There's physical concerns as well as mental. So yeah, this really
and emotional,
right? Yeah,
right. There's all of it. So okay.
Yeah, it really became apparent early on that we can go, that we need to expand knowledge, and that we can go further than legislation such as the American Disabilities Act and the like, not only in relation to ASD, but to include and support neurodiverse user groups. And that's why review of precedents and guidelines of therapeutic and healing gardens is so important, because they do provide more than mere accommodation. They provide support and lessons from case studies of other ASD-focused design projects. We intended to mesh together too. There's a lot they have in common. Take the Mary and Al Schneider Healing Garden, for example, to the right there. Ease of maintenance and heated walkways throughout to create opportunity for seclusion or gathering needs to be available in all seasons. And the Sweetwater project by Roche and Roche is really successful at creating differentiated spaces while maintaining open sight lines. Further, and what I found really interesting about this project is that strategic sensory plantings signal threshold conditions, which can help prepare or cue an individual who may lack the visual acuity for entering or exiting a different space. The book, yes. So book Designing for Autism Spectrum Disorders has guidelines in it as well, but we find that they're mostly tailored to interior environments. So what we really wanted to do is create these guidelines for the design of an outdoor living environment and space, and bring them all together. So
one thing I mentioned about that, and you know, these folks invited me to come in as a guest editor for part of it, and I wrote a small amount of, and I'm going to say an early version of how important the outdoor environment is. And essentially there's 2 or 3 pages in the entire book about landscape. And it really, in my mind, focused even more how underserved this particular aspect has been to date with respect to design considerations.
Mm.
So, and as part of that, I think the other piece is, you know, therapeutic design guidelines have been floating around for a time. Claire Cooper Marcus's work, Marty Barnes, all the folks that have been speaking about that, and along with myself. And so what you'll see is there's some commonality in the therapeutic design guidelines that we've come up with for ASD, but it's the application of those that has really started to focus the work particularly on autism spectrum disorder.
So this is the beefy one, but here's our accumulated list of this investigation, and I won't go through them all, but key to our talk today is firstly the needs for safety, security, and supervision. So Virginia's going to talk to that later, but secondly, and aforementioned, was this idea of providing niches. And number 2, design for a variety of specialized spaces incorporates this idea. And you could say that the master plan really became a composition of garden rooms for these spaces. Number 7, yeah, I guess we can talk about number 7, is design for flexibility, which allows for individuals to take part in the design of their environment. So this includes changeable items such as movable furniture or places to engage in natural processes. But remembering, as per guideline 10, that any equipment needs to be extremely durable, safe, and then of course there's the ease to maintain. And then one more I forgot to touch on is number 3, which is essential, as great care really begins with the overall well-being and mental state of the staff and caregivers. So, yeah.
Before you go from there, one thing I'll just mention is it has been my experience, and regardless of what sector of healing garden one is designing for, therapeutic garden, whichever one, over 43% of the users, like everybody talks about, oh, it needs to be directed completely towards that specialized population. Indeed it is, there's no question. However, over 43% of the users are staff who, in my opinion, are the angels, are frontline workers that we know of right now. They are the people who are risking and taking the chances of caring for folks. And they are truly angels. And to be able to provide for them beautiful space, for them to be able to recharge, rejuvenate, and be able to dive back in to whatever the pieces are that they need to on a day-to-day basis, is so important, and particularly here, and you're going to see a wonderful example of it coming up. So I'll just mention that principle, staff, is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the last one I will touch on and lead into is choose plants that are stimulating, appropriate, and safe. This design guideline actually propagated another document, and something that I was grateful to work on. Ooh, can you move that for me, please? Yeah, so we went and we created this resource, which we provided to the staff and caregivers at LifeWorks, which was an extensive poisonous plant list of both indoor and outdoor plants that may even become toxic at different phases of their growth cycle. And that we have to be really aware of, as anything can become consumed in this population.
So, and with respect to interior plants, and I'm just going to touch on that briefly, this particular garden includes an interior horticultural therapy space. And so you'll see that in a moment. But what well, what we all realized on the design team was, oh, we need to up our game a bit in the interior plants as well, and ensure that we have a very comprehensive list for all of the horticultural therapy activities that are going on. And I'll just say, I've had so many parents from Morgan's Garden come to me and say how important and how wonderful that poisonous plant list has been for them to be able to take home even. So it's just been very, very helpful.
Okay, and the one thing I'll lastly touch on before handing it fully over to Virginia, who is going to go more in depth about the garden design itself, but one thing that was happening concurrently to all of this research was collaborating with the experts on ASD. So that includes the therapists, but the parents, administrative and maintenance staff at LifeWorks, volunteers, and any other caregivers. These are the experts, and this collage is about one of my first experiences of Virginia's legendary design facilitation meetings, where everyone is involved in creating collage, suggesting visionary words, and expressing ideas and concerns, which were collectively voted on and summarized to help prioritize features of the design that would be particular and reflective of this unique group and of the LifeWorks program. So top result.
We're just going to enlarge that so you can see some of our top results.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and the next slide too is
To reduce that. Whoa. Welcome to COVID-19 and the world of, there we go.
Yeah. So yeah, the top result here being the engagement in meaningful work and development of vocational skills. So yeah, take it away, Virginia, and thank you.
Well, I think a couple of things happened, and as one begins on these pieces, and I'm going to just open up these themes just a little bit so you can see them a little bit better, because these were our top ones. Hoses. Sometimes it's things that are incredibly practical. Hoses, and then sustainability, like to go from, and I'm going to call it the smallest thing to a very large concept of sustainability. Table with chairs under shade, a plant wall, shelter greenhouse, raised beds, reclined bench, interactive. So those were all things that they felt really were practical aspects they had to do. The spaces, caves, respite, recharge for staff, 4 seasons areas, an arbor, shady spaces, visually organized, a mound, paths, visibility, and observation. And I think, well, and what I'll say is, overall, above all of these themes, the key particular to this population is that very few, I can't say that there's none, but there are very few attendants to this program that are able to be outside on their own and unobserved. So they usually have, it's typically nearly a 1-to-1 ratio, as in 1 staff to 1 participant. So understand that safety and security isn't listed here because it actually is the total umbrella that goes over top of this themed series of pieces. So we didn't even include it as something you voted on because it was inherent. I'll just say a couple of other bits and pieces here, just little things to see. In the orange ones, that it's calm, that there's a sensory walkway, there are warm spaces, there are quiet backs for benches, that it's interactive, and then these features, swinging gliders, a path for walking and pacing, boulders, water feature, safe mountains, a hammock or a swing, and then of course all the wonderful things that go with plants. Yeah, we're designing a garden, but plants still focus people's hearts. Everything from usable plants and veggies to their scented plants for soap making, which is one of the vocational items that they do at that particular facility. So where are we? We are, north is up. Thank you very much. End of seminar. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Fairmont Boulevard is a main thoroughfare in the town city of Cleveland Heights. Cleveland Heights is a suburb of the city of Cleveland, and Monarch Life Works School is at this corner of Fairmont and Lee. Lee connects to the rest of Cleveland Heights. This is in the southwest corner of Cleveland Heights generally. What is here is it was an original school built in 1963. I have all of the hand drawings, original hand drawings of the school. So you'll see some real treats when you look at it. And what I'll say about it is today, the garden space that they had, northeast corner of an L-shaped building. So you can see that here. You can see our garden site. Yep, you see it, folks. The raised bed there is a old tire from a tractor. Yeah. A bit interesting. I think this photographs actually speak for themselves. We are like, whoa, okay. Anyway, but it really does tell you that there was, that it was time that they actually, things are pretty tired in there. So as always, we're speaking to landscape architects. Everybody knows that off you go into the world of sleeping, dreaming, walking around, scribbling on paper, having a design shred at the office, throwing all the ideas out, put them all back in together again, shake it up. And really what happens is the design partie on the left begins to take shape. And then what we do something in our office called the purple and green. Usually the purple and green means things that are purple don't grow, things that are green do grow. And you kind of continue on, and then you start making different iterations. In the end, and well, I want to just acknowledge, thankfully, Emily was in our office the day that we started putting pen to paper. So she has been a great contributor to all of this. So, application of the design guidelines. And so again, north is up. Fairmont runs across the bottom of the page. To the left is Lee. I think the first piece is we wanted to be sure, because, well, and let me just, I'm just going to read you a quick thing about what they do at Monarch. Okay, so the program they have is an evidence-based model. It combines concept-driven language with visual supports and technology to maximize independence by their participants. Their participants, they are hoping to create pre-vocational training and support them so that they are able to do things like task completion, problem solving, adjusting to maybe productivity and certainly social demands. To give you a sense of it, consumers are asked, consumers or the participants, they engage in age-appropriate activities. It may include promoting interpersonal skills, self-care, schedule and responsibility management, functional communication, fitness, nutrition, and in some cases, meal preparation. Folks, it's a very delicate, and I'm just going to call it a delicate thing. The kitchen of this particular facility everything is accessed by key fob. In other words, it's not safe because some of these folks have no feeling they have no feeling. So they can easily put their hand on a burning hot element on the stove and not feel it. Not even, there's just no connection cognitively to why that would not be healthy for you. So when we speak about this particular group, it has to be secure in a manner that they're not going to be able to hurt themselves or others. but the gross, and I'm going to call it the gross motor, that's not really a great word. I use it this way, the clumsy way, and that's the word of the executive director of the program, the clumsy way that they are able to help people regardless, and participants, regardless of either hyper or hypo, is what they call holding. And a holding really is a big bear hug to help their participants feel safe, to become calm, to have a safe space in which they can process the environment. And they have essentially, and I'm going to say it this way, a staff partner that helps them do that. It's such a, I'm going to call it heartfelt piece to even speak about how challenged some of these folks are. So how do we create a space that is safe for folks? And I'm going to show you a piece about this, but really how these vestibular and proprioceptive systems, gross and fine motor skills, release of pent-up energy, how we create self-help, how these folks can begin to have, and I'm going to say it, a normalized life to be able to have the skills to do that and develop the skills to do that. So I said the overarching principles: safety, security, access, limiting visual and sensory input. I mean, on one hand, you want to limit that visual and sensory input to the folks who are hypo. Mm-hmm. And then you need to minimize it for the folks that are hyper. So I haven't reversed. I'm sorry, I haven't reversed. Emily, thank you. Take that away. Say that again. Say it better, please.
Yeah, so the hyposensitive individuals, they go and seek that stimulation. So often that means spinning equipment,
yes,
or something of the like, whereas the hypersensitive individuals, they're generally overwhelmed by their environment and they need to retreat or find restoration or seclusion.
Okay.
And stimuli minimization.
Great. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So here's the piece that I'll speak about. So again, north being up, a fair amount at the bottom, you'll see 5 arrows coming out of the bottom. Those are all classrooms. Each one of those classrooms typically has 4 to 5, maybe 6 students in it, typically 3 to 4 staff until, well, for various things. And so there's always supervised access being allowed out those doors. And again, sometimes they have them locked, sometimes, but most of the time in class, they do have those now open. And they couldn't before the same way because they didn't have a secure site. So literally, and I'm going to say the blue dashed line around the outside, that is essentially a perimeter fence. And I've put, we've put a hedge all the way around the outer edges, particularly to make it high enough. The bylaws, of course, in the city of Cleveland Heights, they don't really prefer to have high fences at all. And we needed to be able to, and I'm going to say it this way, create a green barrier so that we could limit some of that sensory input. At the same time, that supervised access gets out into the yellow circle, mound, meander, terrace. The woodland allows some unsupervised access. They prefer that you don't go there without a staff member. However, certain folks can handle it and do. The farm and horticultural therapy rooms, there is no unsupervised access, just so that you understand that. And then the last piece, service, which includes where the tools are, because certain folks can't use all the tools that are possible or needed within an area that you would be able to have and grow vegetables. So each one of them has a double or triple locking system. Anybody that is outside of that fence, so I can't show up there and expect to get in, because just people, it has to be locked in order to ensure that these folks stay safely at the facility. Because there is a tendency for people not to be aware of cars necessarily, or there's just so much input outside of these walls that they're not able to process it properly. So the other part I'll mention is predictability and routine. Every day, these folks arrive at 9:30, they go into class, it's highly regimented until 2:30 every day. And they are picked up and delivered to and from their home with a caregiver taking them to and from the facility to the vehicle, from the vehicle to their home. So that just gives you a sense of the level to which these participants need our care.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to add one more thing. And what I think this diagram also speaks to is that just like there's a spectrum of individual abilities, there's a spectrum here of an ability to graduate from something that is very supervised or requires supervision to something that can permit more independence.
That's right.
Mm.
So a great story that goes with this, and you'll see this when we talk about the circle. There's a young man, and I think we talk about it right now. So clear sight lines for staff observation. Okay, so from the classrooms, what they really wanted to be sure is that they had clear sight lines out and be able to have an easy to understand. So this is all back to Kaplan's work that speaks to coherence. Okay, and there's always these pieces about coherence that Rachel, Steve, and Kaplan all speak about in their book, With People in Mind. And this piece is incredibly important. So this central organizing feature is the circle. It's got a shady walk. It's surrounded by red buds, but very importantly, it's a clear sight line. And before we start showing pictures of the garden, I'm just going to say it has not been professionally photographed because the garden was closed. And well, COVID-19 has meant that we have not been able to close that loop yet. The garden is open and being used. However, we only have photographs that are just barely out of construction. So please bear with us. We're delighted to share it with you, but just know they're maybe not quite perfect pictures. But anyway, here we are. So the circle, and one thing I'll just mention is out of the circle. So yes, we still have pylons in the picture. But what I'll say about the circle is that as the classrooms are to my back on this particular photograph, actually not my back. I wasn't even in the United States this spring when this got taken. But what I'll say about it is a young man, to Emily's point, a young man who is unable to sit still in his classroom for longer than about 30 minutes. And so every 30 minutes, he literally, the teachers and the staff now recognize they leave the door unlocked. This particular fellow is allowed to go out the door. He makes 4 circuits of the circle, comes back inside, sits down, and is able to work again. So I think that, and they're doing all the vocational bits and pieces that they're learning. So again, I cherish these stories. Can we talk about this one?
Yeah, so the previous image, we're looking towards the mound, but it's taking into considering the need for prospect and refuge, and the slight mounding was intended to provide a physical challenge and overlook. The kinetic wind sculptures activate without overwhelming stimulation, and yeah, the ability to look out provides the wayfinding and enhances the coherence of the design space.
So you can look back over the garden and literally there we go. So there is the mound looking back towards those classrooms. The classrooms, as you can see there are 5 doors that go in. You can't quite see it to the right there, but you can see how the fence appears in one shot there. What we have done actually is that fence has now been screened off and painted, because what happens is that, well, I'll just say this, there's one particular fellow who comes to that gate and wants to break it down. So he continually rattles the gate. Here's the good news. So far, it hasn't been broken, but it actually tore one of the gate posts off of the saddle that was sunk into the ground with the footings. So I'm just going to say to you, robustness in this garden.
Design guideline 10.
Yeah.
Durable, very durable. Yeah.
Very durable.
Yeah.
So just take, these are things that that the staff felt that this would be fine. But however, this particular fellow, he just does not want to leave. He wants to go out that gate, and that's just his thing. So, and this is part of it. It's really, truly, you can't predict all of those pieces. However, I'll just keep going. And again, this piece about safety and security, I'll just say the logistical phasing plan of being able to actually do construction for this particular population. Again, I was talking about, I digressed, I forgot about the holds when I was mentioning that literally every single day, the number of holds per person is counted. So one of the things that staff does is literally create logs so that people understand, meaning family and caregivers, understand to what level is a person agitated or having their needs met so that they aren't agitated. Well, you can imagine what the staff was thinking when I waltzed in and said, hey, we're going to be under construction for about 9 or 10 months, maybe longer. And their eyes widened and they were just like, wow, this is going to be a nightmare. So what I will say to you is the logistics of construction. We put up a modular fence, but the modular fence, again, because folks want to tear the fence down and see what's happening, that fence could not be on a temporary, we're all familiar with the T-bar base that has a couple of sandbags on the bottom. No, we had to put them in 3 feet deep everywhere. All posts had to be put 3 feet into the ground and allowed to, and had it all tied back to the building. We put up tennis screens on all of the fencing, and then we created a critical series of literally peepholes. The first day, so I'll say it this way, on average, and this is, again, these aren't perfect numbers, but on the average, a person in this particular program may need 2 holds a day on average. Sometimes they need 4, sometimes they need none, but essentially it's 2 holds a day. And the staff was anticipating that the numbers would go from 2 and leap to 8. On the very first day, when trucks, fencing went up, etc., and we were trying to do, so the other part was we were trying to, the contractor was working to do this after school hours at 2:30. So they were working through that particular window as well. The first day they arrive, they start putting up the fencing, and one particular participant began barking and did not stop barking for 2 days. And this is one of the pieces, it breaks your heart. And then what happened was this particular person stopped barking and became literally these peepholes became the most perfect, I'm going to call it visual connections to large, noisy equipment and people doing their work, became the best piece of entertainment ever. And what in fact had happened was the number of holds overall went down by 40%. An astonishing enlightenment for staff, for myself. You have to understand that at night you think to yourself, oh my stars, are we going to disrupt it so much that it won't be worth it. But I will just say to you, indeed, if we can reduce holds even by 10%,
Yeah.
it means there's less stress. There's less stress, of course, the meds work better, the experience is better, the learning is better. I mean, there's just so many aspects. So I digress. I'll just apply these guidelines to the Woodland Walk.
Okay.
Primarily, the Woodland Walk was intended for the staff to recharge. In addition to the staff recharging, of course, there's also a rain garden, bioswale to offset the paved areas, permeable versus impermeable. We have a whole stormwater management system related to the plantings that are in there. We're connecting shade, ecological process. So again, it becomes a bit of learning for those folks who are capable of learning about how and where water goes. They are able to do that. The other part is, this is where we ended up putting the swings. So we ended up finding swing benches, which interestingly enough was very difficult to find. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't have anything.
Oh,
to say,
okay, you're
just
gonna
the
go.
next,
Okay. So looking down, this was just before, you can see the rain garden on the right beside the Japanese maple at the end of the canopy on your right-hand side. There's a little tiny bit of green roof happening there. I can take no credit for that. Over to the left and underneath the tree and behind the largest tree that you see there, again, there were no trees in the end that we started with. Everything here you see that has been planted by our works. Underneath the tree that's here is the rain garden behind and below it. You'll see two platforms, and I'm going to call them staggered platforms of permeable granular screenings. Those were set up and getting ready for the two swings and pavilion. I'm going to call them shade pavilions for lack of a better term, incoming. We only have rainy pictures of those from the contractor, so please know and I just say thank you to them for even taking the pictures. We just haven't received any new ones yet. But you can see here, they are a pair of shade structures, arbors. This is a catalog item because quite frankly, due to liability in the United States, no one would do a custom swing without, well, they just wouldn't do it. So I'll just say that. If you found a place that is doing swinging benches, that would be great. So you've saw about seasonality and color. I'll just mention in here, sensory garden. We have the chimes that are there that you strike with a mallet. They essentially make sure that the mallet is taken out with staff because they want to be sure that that isn't used inappropriately. And then you can see, and again, this piece about vocational and what are they able to do. You can see that birdhouses are being made. The birdhouse is there in that photograph as well.
Yeah. So the terrace was, well, it's a good one. They're all good ones. But here you can see about the drawing too is the idea of the sight lines and the connection between indoor and outdoor spaces. But the terrace really allows for the flexibility of programming as everything there is movable. And the plantings are to provide a gradual, safe and nurturing entry to the garden. Yeah. Where's the pictures?
Yep, I'm going to them right now.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we're going to just move along a little more quickly here. So the terrace, the canopy to the left, we repainted all of the supports. We put a ceiling underneath. We removed the birds and the vermin from living in there. And suddenly it became a wonderful space to have places for students to work outside. You can see the fencing that's here, and literally that is protecting, I'm going to call it the secure area for the farm. So the area that you can see here, those chairs can be moved anywhere throughout the garden. And one of the things that we wanted to be able to mention, I'm going to read this in case you can't, and I'll just go quickly. Thought I would share a sweet anecdote from yesterday. This is from the program director. 4 o'clock, typically most staff exit the building around 3:30 when their scheduled time at Monarch ends. I noticed a number of cars still in the parking lot and yet hadn't heard voices in some time. Walked around a bit inside the building, but didn't hear anyone. Decided particularly odd and thought I would check one last place, the garden. Sure enough, found everyone out there, lounging on the newly installed benches, laughing as they talked about the day. So cool to see, and everyone immediately commented about how unbelievably cool the space was, relaxing, uplifting, and truly incredible. The first of many stories. I think horticultural therapy cannot be understated and how important it is, and certainly attends to pieces about programming loose parts, fine and gross motor skills, developmental. The pieces that I'll just say is that the research shows that hort therapy is literally receives some of the, this population, the autism spectrum disorder population, receives some of the highest benefits from gardens and hort therapy in a daily situation. And I'll just say that comes out, it really talks about quiet fascination, and Kaplan talk about that a lot, coming from the setting itself, from the sound patterns, the motion, intensity of form and color. And it really began to say that literally 72% of participants were observed of having significantly less anxiety when engaging in the garden and horticultural therapies in comparison to other daily tasks. Mm-hmm. Now, what you'll see here is what we ended up doing, and I'll just go back to this sketch. You'll see on the left-hand side, former kitchen, the word on the left, and then existing bike storage and what I called the cave. It was really a garage. What got decided, even though we had designed this greenhouse, what ended up being decided was that we would renovate those two existing interior spaces because of the ability to be able to attend to the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing aspects needed. We added 3, and you can see them on the roof there. We added 3 skylights down into a space. We added glass windows on an existing garage door and glass windows on the other side. So literally they can open this entire thing up, open the gates to the greater garden if everybody is able to be out there. Otherwise, they can keep one side locked on the left-hand corner of the interior garage space and just open up and literally have everybody in the farm area. So again, an early photo of this. So please note, they've just planted their pumpkins and they had a pumpkin harvest, by the way. I think then this whole key about how do we connect vocation to not, and I'll just say this, you'll see a water feature in the front. That is a nickel-plated hand pump and literally runs water down over the rock. They use it in the farm to watering. They also have hoses in there. The lavender, I think, is the important piece that I would want to say here. The lavender on the left-hand side is used in their soap making and soap selling that they do at the local market. And you can buy Lavender LifeWorks soap online. So if you care to support, I'm sure you'll get it sent to you.
Yeah, these are the list of references for your reference of the literature review and design guidelines. And
so just so that you know, you can get this from Michelle, so you can get this if you would like. Morgan's Garden's been published. It just won in 2019 the honor award. I'll just say the work itself is the piece that is so rewarding. So although these pieces are important, sure they are, but not as important as the people's lives that we have had the opportunity to affect. And I think that is one of the richest things that a landscape architect can ask for. Again, we want to acknowledge and thank LACF. Morgan's drawings, you can see here those flowers that I opened with. They've been blown blown into glass sculptures by a local artist. But our appreciation and thanks really go to the donors, the garden committee, management, staff, and caregivers. although it's not a perfect picture, I get that, but the garden's already begun to create its magic. And, you know, we just usher these wonderful spaces into the world and get to watch them grow. So I'll just say thank you for that. And I think Dr. Zeus is always my inspirational friend.
Yeah.
Why fit in when we were born to stand out? I'll just say that. Thank you so much for your attendance and question and answers. Now I am going to, I'm going to go back to, I'm going to stop sharing. So excuse me while I get out of there, go back to here, stopping the broadcast. And we are back.
Thank you so much, Virginia and Emily. Wow, the passion you demonstrate for this project really shows through. Does anybody have any questions? Please ask them through the chat. We did have a question earlier about how this information was going to get shared. And of course, we are going to be posting this presentation on our YouTube channel and on the CSLA website. Also, I'll be following up with Virginia and Emily after the holidays to more widely distribute all this great research. So are there any other questions that people would like to post through the chat box?
I see one that I'll just mention that says, Dear Virginia, are these plant lists available in a resource available to CSLA or online? We will make sure that the poisonous plant list does become a part of that.
Absolutely, and we'll be posting that on our human health and well-being website.
Okay, I see a cue from Lonnie Burrows. Thank you. From a design perspective, can we assume all pathways and connections should be circulatory and smooth with no dead ends? I'm going to answer that live. So I'll just say, you can assume that all pathways and connections should be circulatory if possible. Is it smooth? Some of ours are, but some of them aren't. Some of them are purposely stepping stones, because what we're looking to do is create the visual acuity of being able to place your feet one onto the other, onto stepping stones. So
And hear that texture.
And yes,
Yeah, just the screening
Tactile,
themselves.
yeah.
It's the tactile. Yeah, can provide those cues to threshold conditions or changes.
And then there's another question here. Have there been maintenance guidelines in place to maintain visibility and accessibility? From Sylvia Arm.
So yes, we're creating maintenance guidelines. Yes, they are taking that as a long-term piece. I will say we were blessed to have a singular donor come forward, and not only has she paid for the garden and for every single change order and item that somebody from the garden committee would bring up, literally she has now said, okay, and now we'll take care of it for you. So yes, we have maintenance guidelines, but we also have an angel that helps pay for those.
And we had a nice message from Faye Langmaid, who is the chair of the grants committee at the LACF, who says, we appreciate the work you're able to accomplish with the grant and delighted with the results.
Thank you. Thanks, Faye.
Thank you, everybody. So again, our thanks to Virginia and Emily for this first webinar. We will be having a whole series of webinars throughout from now until May. The next one will be on January 14th at 2:30 Eastern for John Zvonar and the Garden of Provinces and Territories, almost 60 years along and still relevant. So hopefully you'll be able to join us with that. Oh, I see we had another question come in just before we log off. How much time do you spend in discussions on programming? So to do the design, Virginia, from Judith Wright.
How much time do I spend in discussions on programming? So meaning how much time do I spend with the people who are actually putting input into the garden? I'm going to assume that that's right. Okay, thank you, Judith. I think there's two things. The first one is, certainly I go and I talk with the garden committee. So you start there. On any healing garden, there typically is a healing garden or a group of people that you speak to. And So what we did is toured their existing facility. We also toured their main, and I'm gonna call it their main facility that had younger people, not adults. They were younger, mentally challenged folks, in every spectrum of the way. And I'll just say, so we did tours with everybody, also with the staff that did that. That helps us begin to understand the program. Then, and again, this has just been my experience, is the fastest way to be able to get that kind of input is to use small group process, or where necessary, large group process intervention. And those items make such a difference because you can get the input very, very quickly. Usually it's a 4 to 6 hour event. Food gets served, very important. That because you keep people engaged, you help them have the time of their life, coming up with all the things that they can dream of. Of course, and there are many aspects to that, but Judith, I'll just say, usually the time that's spent is about 3 days of what I'll call myself and an intern or another landscape architect, and then another day to prepare for the input session, then a day for the input session, and then a day to document the results.
And then about 2 weeks before that, where you're looking at all these case studies, and we also printed a bunch of examples of designs for ASD specifically, and brought them to the facilitation process, right, to discuss those programmatic ideas as well. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
One final question from Allison Lumby. Were any of the participants able to contribute to the design consultation?
You know, that's a great and poignant question for me. Usually, and I'll say it this way, on many of the gardens that I've worked in, be it cancer care or otherwise, we've had the blessing of having cancer care survivors, etc. The participants in this particular program, because of the level of their ASD, they were not able to participate. So one of the ways that we handled that was really getting parents and the caregivers for that particular population that was at the school at the time to participate, because that's the only way that they could give input. That doesn't mean, though, that I'll just say this, that the way that has happened, literally, and I call them the nickname is the kiddos. The kiddos are out there as often as they possibly can. So I'll just say we got some of it right anyway, maybe lots.
Yeah. And I this is more of an anecdote. I don't know if it pertains to the question or not.
Sure.
But there's a picture we received of Morgan, and she's outside in the rain, just soaked, but she's watering a garden outside in the rain.
Right.
And I don't know, I feel like the symbolism of that came into the water feature that is central to the terrace.
Yeah, thank you.
Ladies, do you have energy for one more question?
Sure, bring it
All
on.
right, well, Rajinder here is asking, has this project spurred more inquiries and gardens to be designed and built?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
go right ahead.
So I'm doing my architectural thesis. And one of the things I'm interested in is urban agriculture, but Virginia and I both come from being farmers originally. We're both farmers, I'm fourth generation. And this project helped me build a framework for thinking about how urban agriculture is currently integrated and what more needs to be done to ensure not only the commitment to the project, but yeah, really getting to understand the difficulties in designing something. What else do I want to say this? But yes, it has. Yes, it has really. And this process is basically the framework for my thesis. So
thank you. Thank you. Does that answer your question? I can't see her chat, so I'm not sure.
Well, that's wonderful. Well,
Hey, wait,
I think
stand by. There's another question from Marie. Is there a winter component to Morgan's garden? Absolutely there is. So this is the part that and again, the garden is just finished, so they're going outside. It's Cleveland, come on. And that's why they love Canadians, because we all go like, we get snow. So yes, indeed. So their intention is during winter, they're going to start doing, and I'm going to say it this way, snowmen and creating winter play. And also, they're still going to allow, and I'm going to say it, they're going to allow students to still go outside. And I think that the key is at that moment, it's a high, I'm going to call it a highly, it's a big commitment by staff, because folks have to get onto their boots and get on their coat and make sure that so it becomes an activity of daily living. So in fact, what happens is by having them put on their coat and do this and do that, they recognize that it's cold out. And so that whole connectivity of how that works and the seasonality of the design, absolutely, they are going to shovel the circular walkway. So that just helps you know. Zara, how do we communicate the importance of these outdoor healing spaces in the development of facilities with architecture components, which usually eat the budget, but often leave landscape as few plants and components as possible? Well, I'll say this. Keep writing, keep speaking, keep on going after, and I'm going to say it this way, and whether it's architects or staff or parents or other, and so literally for me, it's part of the life's work. It's just part of the ethos of doing this work, to literally continue to speak about it. I don't think, here's one of the silver linings that's come out of a global pandemic. People are suddenly realizing how important their home environment truly is, and how important it is to be able to connect outside. The conservation authorities that are nearby our house have never had as many visitors, as many, and literally their attendance is through the roof. So I'll just say to you, people are getting it finally. That being said, and here's a great news piece. Keep after it, because it's starting to take, I'm going to say it this way, it's like dominoes. We just have to keep clicking away at it, clicking away at it, clicking away, and suddenly it's going to just and go. I'll just say it's happening. So we are right at it.
Yeah.
It was very interesting because Emily, of course, has friends at Yale and who are sort of saying, and she said to me about, I'm going to say 6 months ago, she turned and looked at me and she's like, my friend just called me. And I'm thinking about, as you know, yeah. And my friend said to me, I said to her, oh, look, I'm thinking about going to Harvard for landscape architecture. And the girl said, her friend at Yale goes, yeah, landscape architecture is where it's at. How about that for an uplifting round out in the world of architecture students? Landscape architecture is where it's at, folks.
Yeah.
Well, on that inspiring note,
Yeah.
what a time for the profession. And thank you so much, Virginia and Emily. And I'll take this opportunity to wish everybody happy holidays. Stay safe, stay outside, although it is -20 in Ottawa today. So, but again, thank you so much. This was fascinating, and we will certainly hear more from you in the new year, I'm sure.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Have a great day.
Take care.